Most people think you need to hire an inspector with fancy gadgets or rip open your walls to find hidden toxic mold. But here's the truth. Well-trained canine teams can locate hidden mold without touching a single wall. And I'm not talking about just any dog with a nose. I'm talking about professionally trained detection dogs that can pinpoint mold behind drywall, in HVACs, and in sealed spaces that you'd never even think to check. And that's using science. That's 10,000 times more accurate than a human detection. Now, if you've been suffering from unexplained symptoms like chronic headaches, fatigue, brain fog, things your doctor just can't explain, and traditional testing has failed you, this might be the answer that you've been searching for. Because here's what most people don't know. Air tests miss hidden mold constantly. Studies show 60 to 70% false negatives in complex environments. And that means you could be getting all clear reports while toxic mold is actively growing behind your walls, making you sicker every single day. I'm Susan Russell from Mold Dog Knows, and our professionally trained detection teams have found hidden toxic mold that inspectors missed in hundreds of homes. These aren't just pet dogs that we've trained to sniff around. These are professional scent detection dogs and handlers. Many of them, the handlers, running explosives, narcotics, even cadaver detection canines, applying that same level of precision to mold. So in this video, I'm going to walk through exactly how canine teams find mold behind walls without demolition. We're going to cover what dogs are actually detecting because it's probably not what you think. So let's go over how they track mold with insane precision, why this beats traditional testing by a landslide, and what actually separates a legitimate canine team from someone who just has a pet or maybe a week of training as a handler. And then finally, the emotional validation moment that changes everything for families who've been dismissed and gaslit for years. But first, let me tell you why this matters so much. So here's something that surprises people every single time. Dogs are not actually detecting mold spores, nor are they detecting mycotoxins. At least we don't have that science yet to confirm it. You may hear some people claiming that their dogs can detect mycotoxins, but again, that has yet to be proven. It's not proven scientifically. At Mold Dog Knows, we are based in science, so we are not going to make claims that we cannot back up. Our VP of Canine Operations, Steve Antomarchi, is, however, actively involved in developing industry standards through the Global Forensics Justice Center at Florida International University. And this includes initiating a study testing a canine's ability to detect mold spores as well as mycotoxins. So, what are dogs actually detecting? It's MVOCs. This is proven. That stands for microbial volatile organic compounds. These are the gases, also known as mold farts, that mold puts out when it's actively growing. Think of MVOCs like smoke coming up from a fire. You may not see the fire itself, but you know exactly where it is by following that smell or following the smoke. You can track it. Dogs do the exact same thing with mold, except they follow the trail with insane precision. It's actually really fascinating how this works. So, picture a cone like this. You start at one small spot, the source, and it branches out into a wider cone shape as the scent disperses. And when a dog enters that smell on the wide end of the cone, they maneuver, they narrow in, and they follow the scent concentration until they actually reach the exact location of the source. A dog's nose works on a completely different level than humans. Now, we smell something funky and we think, that's weird, right? Well, dogs actually smell individual chemical signatures as parts per trillion, even when those signatures are layered through drywall, dust, insulation, flooring, and further affected by air movement. So let's talk about air movement. That is huge, and we're going to talk about why that matters so much and why it's so incredibly important to have a trained handler, someone who is highly experienced and understands how scent behaves in a home or a building. It's really important. Now, here's one thing. A dog's nose is 50 times stronger than yours, and depending on the breed and the training, it's about 10,000 to 100 times more accurate. Pretty crazy, huh? And yes, there are certain types of dogs that are better at odor detection than others. It's no different than, say, athletics. Some people are going to excel in certain areas, and it's no different with dogs. So this is the exact same science used in narcotics detection, explosives detection, missing persons, cadaver recovery, cancer sniffing, medical dogs, agricultural detection, conservation work. The list, it goes on and on. We're simply applying that same level of precision to mold. So according to research, trained detection dogs can identify mold with over 95% accuracy. They have up to 300 million scent receptors compared to about 6 million in humans. That's huge. So when mold is actively growing, it's releasing the gases, the MVOCs, and those gases move through the house or through the building. So even when mold is sealed behind drywall, baseboards, flooring cabinets, or even HVAC cavities, it's still off-gassing. And those gases leak through microscopic gaps that humans would never even notice. So that's why you'll often see a dog alert at like the floorboards or where walls come together or even the electrical outlets. That's the source where it comes out. The dog alerts there because the gases are actually escaping. And then a good handler is going to do what we call bracket that alert. And what that means is they go down one side of the wall and then they check the other side, like the back side, to try to narrow in on where that odor might be coming from. And maybe they'll check what's on the back side of that wall. It might be the kitchen. Is it something under the cabinet? Is it perhaps in the laundry room? And that's the precision with a good team. So with a properly trained canine, they will sniff entry points, follow air currents, and isolate the exact source, and then they alert. And that's when our team will actually mark the alert on the wall or where the dog alerted. And know this, the dogs alert differently. Some will sit, some will point, some will stare, some will sit, and some actually tap with their paw. It varies with their personality and style. But all dogs alert to the strongest concentration all the time. So this is non-invasive detection at its finest. No cutting walls, no pulling up flooring. Dogs detect mold by scent alone. Let me paint you a picture of how this actually works in a real home. So imagine you're a mom and you've been dealing with chronic headaches for months. That was actually me. And your kids are getting nosebleeds. Your doctor says everything is normal. You've hired an inspector who did an air test and they told you your house was fine. But you know something is wrong. You can feel it. So you call in a canine detection team. The handler walks in with the dog, and here's what happens. The dog enters the home and immediately starts working. Their nose is processing thousands of scent molecules per second. They're not just smelling your house, they're smelling individual chemical signatures in the air. That's the MVOCs released by active mold growth. The dog picks up the scent on the wide end of the cone. Maybe it's faint at first, but as they move towards the room, the scent gets stronger and stronger. They're following the concentration gradient and narrowing in. The dog moves towards the wall, sniffs along the baseboards, and moves to the electrical outlet. Then it stops. It sits. It might look up to its handler or stare at the wall, and that's the alert. It's letting the handler know that this is where I'm smelling the MVOCs. So they check the other side of the wall. It's the bathroom. There was a slow leak behind the shower tile that nobody knew about. The mold has been growing for months, sealed behind the wall, and the dog found it in minutes. So again, a good handler understands how air moves through a home or a building, and they know that HVAC systems can pull scent from one room to another. They also know that temperature differences create air currents, and they know that humidity affects how scent disperses. So this is why handler training matters so very much. At Mold Dog Knows, All of our handlers are professional scent detection handlers, and most of them are also running, or they have run, explosives, narcotics, or maybe even cadaver canines. They understand scent theory, they understand how to read their dog's behavior, and they understand how to bracket an alert to confirm the source. A dog is insanely brilliant. To them, it's a game, but a dog and a handler together, now that is science-based detection, and the best tool ever. It's truly phenomenal. Mike McNatt of healthyhomes.help calls it the perfect trifecta. Bring in the mold dog, use the mind of an indoor environmental professional, and combine that with their mechanical tools. This way, you're going to get the very best coverage of a home to nail down exactly where the mold source is. So first, I'm going to explain why traditional testing fails so often. Air tests can miss hidden mold, and they do constantly. It happened to our family twice, and it's happened to my husband's patients many a times. Studies show 60 to 70% false negatives in complex environments. Think about that for a second. That means if you hire a traditional inspector and they do an air test, there is a 60 to 70% chance that they will miss hidden mold if it's in a complex environment, which most homes are. And why is that? Well, because air tests rely on sampling at any single moment in time. They're taking a snapshot of the air in your home and hoping that that snapshot captures mold spores that are floating around. But here's a problem. Mold doesn't always release spores into the air, especially when it's sealed behind walls or inaccessible cavities. Air samples often miss heavy molds like Stachybotrys, that's the black mold, and Chaetomium. So you could have a massive mold problem behind your walls and the air tests come back clean. You're told everything is fine, but you are still sick. Canine detection doesn't rely on air sampling at a single moment in time. Dogs detect the signature of active mold growth itself, the MVOCs, that the mold's releasing. That's 24/7 when it's actively growing. Now this means they find mold behind walls. That's mold in inaccessible cavities as well as accessible cavities, mold that hasn't released enough spores to trigger an air test, mold that inspectors have overlooked, and mold that's been cleaned but not fully removed. Oh, and by the way, never use Clorox. Never use Clorox on mold. It does not kill it, it only proliferates its growth. It is not a solution. So let's get back to the dogs. When they detect mold, they do it in minutes, not days. That's why this is such a great resource if you're in an option period and buying a home. You'll get immediate results, and there is no invasive testing. In other words, you don't have to open up a wall. There are no holes, there's no guessing, no thousands of dollars spent on maybe this is where the mold is. And know this, left undetected, mold spores quickly spread through HVAC systems, drywall, and flooring. So the longer you wait, the worse it gets, and the more expensive remediation becomes. If you've been suffering from unexplained symptoms and you just don't know where it is, or traditional testing has failed you, don't wait until it's too late. Our canine teams can find what others miss. Check the link in the description to learn more about scheduling your canine mold detection today. Now here's something huge that you need to know. Anyone can say, we have a mold dog and I'm a professional. That doesn't mean anything. Certification and training are everything. Let me qualify that. Proper certification and training are everything. The strongest teams train with verified lab-created odor samples, not random stuff in jars, not grabbing a piece of moldy wood at Home Depot and hoping for the best. They also run blind tests regularly to ensure that the dog is maintaining its accuracy. And finally, the handler should be trained in professional scent detection through a qualified trainer and with ongoing oversight. At Mold Dog Knows, all of our handlers are professional scent detection handlers. Most of them are also running, or they have run, bomb, narcotics, human trafficking, or cadaver dogs. They understand how to proof a dog. And finally, they must maintain third-party certification, and I'm not talking about self-certification by the trainer. This is the same science and procedure used by law enforcement and military. The handler's testimony will stand up in court. That's why it's used with local, state, and federal agencies. You trust mom dogs, right? You trust narcotics dogs? Their testimony is admissible in court. It is the same level of training and precision applied to mold detection with Mold Dog Knows. And it should be, because we are dealing with your health. But please know, not everybody operates at this level. It's good to ask questions. So when you're looking for a canine team, ask these questions. Pick up a pen and paper if you have it nearby. Where did your dog receive its training? Check it out. Do you use verified lab-created odor samples? If so, from where? How often do you run blind tests, and what does that look like? And what is your handler's background in scent detection? And then finally, are you certified, and if so, by whom? Is this a third-party independent certification? If they can't answer those simple questions confidently, we suggest you walk away. Because a poorly trained dog with poorly trained handlers can give you false positives or false negatives. And it's also true that a bad handler that doesn't have the proper verified training can mess up a phenomenally trained dog. This is all very bad and much worse than just not even using a mold dog. This is where it gets real. And I really want you to hear this, because if you have been sick for years, if you have spent thousands on air tests and you've hired multiple inspectors and gotten all clear reports, if you've been dismissed by doctors and gaslit by people who don't believe you, this is for you. You are not crazy. You're not making it up. There is something wrong, and I've been there, I know. And when a dog walks into your house and beelines for the real source behind the wall, it's validating, it's confirming, and it's pretty emotional, and it really changes everything. You finally have the suspected source. You can start to move forward instead of spinning your wheels and wondering if you're losing your mind, right? So I've seen women break down in tears when the dog alerts, and not because they're happy that there's mold. Nobody wants mold in their home, but they finally have proof. They finally have some validation. They can show their husband or their friends and say, see, I told you something was wrong. They can protect their kids. They can create an action plan for remediation and start their healing journey. Well, that's huge. This is why we do what we do. Because when traditional methods fail, nature provides the answer. So if you've never heard of canine mold detection before, you're not alone. People ask me all the time, what do you do? And I say, well, I have a canine mold detection business. And I get like this blank stare, and they say, a what? And I say, we find hidden toxic mold that people don't know is present, usually in their home, sometimes it's their office, sometimes even a gym. And some people still don't get it, but the smart ones think, oh yeah, they make that connection, like mom dogs, like narcotic dogs, and it starts to click. And you trust them, right? Well, this is no different. It's the same training. Most people haven't heard of canine mold detection, but it is truly the most advanced precision and non-invasive tool that we have today for discovering hidden toxic mold. And it's really quick, plus it's safe. So if you know something is off in your home, trust your instincts. Don't let another inspector tell you everything is fine when you know it is not fine. Because the hidden mold causing your symptoms is real, and it can be found. Now, if you want to learn more about what to do after mold is detected, because finding it is only the first step, check out the video I'm linking next, where we will break down the remediation process and how to make sure the mold is actually removed and not just covered up. Don't let hidden mold harm your family. Click that video now.